G'day there, wherever you are around this wonderful world. This is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. I'm Tony Jack, the Bear Mance, your usual host, week in and sort of week out. And we are here at Deluxe Mastering in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm absolutely delighted to host a bloke who I haven't seen in over 20 years. He's probably the most envied mastering engineer on the planet, given where he works and who he works under and the artists that he works with. And I am so chuffed that he is here with me today. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Adam Ayan on the podcast. Adam, g'day and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Tony. It's great to see you, man.
It's been a very long time since last time I saw you. You were a fresh kid out of Berkeley, or were you at Berkeley or finished up at Berkeley?
No, I was at UMass Lowell in Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts at Lowell.
Okay, but didn't you do Berkeley though? You studied there? Were you not a Berkeley alumni of Berkeley?
No, definitely not. University of Massachusetts at Lowell that has a sound recording program that's similar to the MP&E program at Berkeley, but University of Massachusetts.
Okay, and you were one of 40 billion people who probably tried to get in and work at under the tutelage of Bob. I think you were one or two of how many people actually did work under Bob as an intern? Not that many, right?
No, not that many. And it wasn't an intern. I was an employee. I'm an employee, but as he tells it, only two people on the planet have directly worked underneath him. Myself, and then prior to myself, a guy who does production work for us here named Brian Lee.
Wow. So
the only two that have ever actually been in the room with him and learned directly from him, which I did for a couple of years before we both realized I had the aptitude to master records. And at that point, which was about 2000, 2001, I started developing my own clientele here.
That's extraordinary. That really is extraordinary, because I could imagine Bob would have been hit up by just countless amounts of people who would have wanted to work with him from all over the world. And yet I'd hate to see what it would have been like for him just to, the request he got. He would have got sick of him after a while, I could imagine. But wow, look, that's a fantastic achievement, Adam, and congratulations to you. And 20 years later, here you are now. You're pretty much not just taking part, but taking over that joint, it seems.
Well, I would say, at the very least, it's just Bob and I that do all the billing here, that do all of the mastering, and we're equally busy. We both have great clientele, and again, we're the only two mastering engineers here.
So did you have that? Was that one of the aspirations to actually master, or you didn't start out with that intention?
No, I definitely started out with that intention. I interned and worked at another mastering studio outside of Boston for a little bit before I came here. And I do recall when I was first interviewed for a job here, I was asked, the typical, where do you see yourself in 5 years question? And I said, well, I want to be a mastering engineer here. And that ended up happening not in 5 years, but in less than 2.5, 3 years.
That's phenomenal. It's a very different pathway for people now, isn't it? Because most people who want to enter the business usually will either have to start up their own thing, because the big studios, we knew it growing up, it's pretty much ceased to exist, or they're much smaller than they ever were. So I think sometimes I wonder whether, because I didn't go through a traditional internship myself, I just went to lots of different places and learned from lots of different engineers and picked up bits along the way, and then a bit of trial and error. And then I kind of mishmashed together a style, if you will, and then set up my own shop. But do you think that working, under the direct tutelage of Bob, it was really what's made the difference for you? Do you think that if you'd gone under a different kind of way, you probably wouldn't be as accomplished as you are?
Maybe, possibly so. Number one being it was considered then, and I hope still is considered now, one of the best mastering studios in the world. That's why I wanted to be here in the first place. So that offered, the tutelage under Bob, which was huge. I like to call it like the Harvard education of mastering. And also, opened up opportunities early on that probably wouldn't have been there, at least certainly not if I had started my own place. But you're right, that system is broke now. I started here over 20 years ago at the tail end of, what the recording industry and what recording studios were like. just before things started to change and fracture. So that afforded me the ability to learn the way engineers used to learn, which would be under the tutelage of a senior engineer, and having a mentorship, which I really think that the mentor-assistant relationship is unfortunately broken in our industry, but is a really important one.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I found in my development, that I had lots of good mentors. And while I didn't have one particular person that, that sort of carried me through, my younger years, I always remembered that advice I got from people, always remembered the fact that, all the great engineers that I had the privilege of being able to contact, who were, they were approachable, they were friendly, they were helpful. There was no trade secrets as such that were ever sort of held back. And I always remember that. And I said, when I was much younger, that one of these days, if I get into my own place, I'd love to be able to do that for young kids. And that's what's one of the big things that drives me, for this podcast and for what I'm doing as I transition through life. And so you're right. I think there's a lot to be said about people who are willing to open up and share, and not just about the technical aspects of the job, but also with respect to the mindset development, because especially when you're young, Adam, and I'm sure you've experienced this, that you would have had your moments of self-doubt. You would have had your moments of, am I doing this right? Am I really cut out for this? And having someone there who was able to, be behind you, back you up, and share their stories as well of their failings and their times where they were feeling a little insecure, to carry through.
Yeah, I mean, that's all so important. And that's why I love doing things like this podcast of yours. And I teach a little bit at our local university's School of Music, and I go to the AES and I give talks. I think that mentorship, I know that I benefited from it, not only from working under Bob at the beginning, but also from all the other mentors I've had. I think it's such an important thing. And I try to do the same kinds of things you do as well, to not even necessarily pay that forward, but I just think, as a creative community, it's such an important aspect of what we do.
Yeah, most definitely, because I'm sure in America, as it is here in Australia, for those kids who are, artistic, they want to pursue, whether it's a music, or whether it's photography, painting, sculpting, they want to be poets, anything that's not, that's not what we would consider, your mainstream kind of work, are not necessarily encouraged. And everyone's told, you must go to university, you must get a degree, you must get the regular kind of job, and think of your art as a hobby or a great sideline. And that was something that was drilled into me as a youngster. So I think that, it is important, because culturally we don't have enough support for people that want to go out and do the thing they love to do. Because while it's great to have a job, it's great to have an income, there are a lot of people out there who are doing jobs they hate. They're having unhappy lives. And I think most people would prefer to have less of an income, but be fulfilled in what they do in their day-to-day. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the dream. I think that's the dream. And I think that any young person, any person in general, should aspire to that. You spend so much of your life working that to be unhappy in your work, it must not feel good at all. I feel very fortunate. I'm extremely happy in my work, and that makes coming to work easy. I mean, it is still work sometimes, but it's easy. It's fulfilling and gratifying, and I couldn't imagine living any other way. So I agree. I would always support folks in whatever they want to do. I mean, if you've got to spend your life working to make a living, and we all do, you might as well be doing something that gets you excited and makes you happy.
Tell me something. Do you find when you leave work, one question I get asked a lot is, do you still enjoy music as a pleasure thing after being around it so much? Do you still go home? Do you have you invested in a stereo system, a good car stereo, and do you still purchase music, and do you still enjoy listening to music outside of work? What's your experience with all that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so happy that in all the years that I've been a professional engineer, which is the 22, 23 years now, I haven't lost sight on why I got into it in the first place. And that was for the love of music, and specifically the love of recorded music as well. And I listen to tons of music at home, listen in the car, listen everywhere. There are moments when I want a little quiet as well, but I still listen to music as much as I ever have. And I think that's really important, because if this turned me off from that, that would be the opposite of what I want out of life.
Yeah. Do you find that you listen? I know for quite some time I would invest in music and listen to stuff that I necessarily wasn't completely turned on by, but in the context of the job, because I thought a great engineer is a guy that would be able to handle all kinds of music and stylistically have an understanding of the genre that's presented, because you never know what's coming in the door. Even though some engineers can become known for a particular genre because they have success with a certain record, I found I would say 40% of the stuff I would buy or listen to wasn't necessarily what I liked, but I felt it was necessary for me to get some understanding of. Do you find the same with you, or do you, or are you more forgiving with what you listen to?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, I'm more forgiving of what I listen to just because I like a really large variety of music. But that said, no, I've always done my homework in other genres of music that aren't what I would gravitate towards just as a listener or as a fan, so that would be ready for them professionally. I've done that, certainly a lot of that when I was younger and first starting out. And the one thing I've always said is I like a large variety of music, and as long as it's really done well, and I'm fortunate in the sense that I get to work on a lot of really great records, whether they're my cup of tea or not, I get to work with a lot of amazing musicians and artists, and that itself fires me up, even if it's not a genre that specifically I gravitate towards at home or in casual enjoyment listening.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things where, like, again, noticing all the stuff you put out online, following you, you've always got a pretty wide variety of stuff, whether it's a country record, a rock record, a pop
Yeah.
record, a Latin record, and I think if you can be in a position where you can be consistent across a wide variety and not necessarily known. You may be, for example, an engineer. I'm sure you and I both have huge respect for a guy like Ted Jensen. Okay, synonymous with a lot of heavy rock and you know heavy sounding records, because most of again, he's had so much success in that area that everyone will send their stuff to him. And I'm sure that he could handle any record and just absolutely smash it. But the fact that he's synonymous with that can kind of limit you, I think, in terms of, people who want
I
to use it,
agree.
and that's not necessarily his fault or anyone's fault. And sometimes you can't even be in control of what record will do well and what won't do well. But if you can navigate a career where you can be, I think, consistent and do well across everywhere, it just opens you up to so much more possibility. And I think that's a great place to be if you can afford that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that makes for a more enjoyable experience for me personally, at least. I come from a rock background, but if all I do is rock records, I might get a little bored, And so on any given day, I might do a rock thing, then on that same day do a Latin thing, and then on that same day do something from Australia, and then on that same day do a country thing or a pop thing. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy jumping from genre to genre, and I think that what I've been told by a lot of my clients over the years that I take is very flattering, is that I'm very consistent in the sense that I consistently make their recordings sound great, whatever the genre is. And that's what I want to do. And that's enjoyable to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Tell me, I remember when I first visited Gateway, when it was still fairly new, I was told that that the studio being built in Portland actually helped to drive the economy, because there were so many attended sessions and so many people flying in from around the world to come and come along. And of course, them coming along would be hotels and restaurants and this and that and the other. And so I see that you still get a lot of attended sessions coming in. So you're still finding that at Gateway, still lots of people coming in attending, even though these days with the internet.
Yeah. I've actually found that maybe it actually is certainly less than when you first came out here. Where it might have been 80% not attended, 20% attended, or 75 not attended, 25 attended. Now it's more like 90-10. 90% not attended, 10% attended.
Oh, okay.
So it's fewer and further between. I've got to think that, the internet, being able to do things like you and I are doing right now. I'm in Portland, Maine, you're in Melbourne, Australia. We can have this great conversation. The fact that we can push files all around the world very easily via the internet. And just the way business is conducted these days has changed that a little bit to where it's fewer attended sessions. I mean, we still have a fair amount of them, but it's certainly fewer and further between than they used to be. People do come here and they love it when they get here. They love being in Portland. They love being here in the studio and hanging out for the session, but it's actually fewer than it used to be.
Has the place grown since I was last there in terms of the building, or is it's the same building?
It's the same square footage. What's changed since you were here, I believe, is my room where I am now. And if you know what, if you don't mind, I'm going to lift up the monitor so you can see the room. Is that okay? So my room, the last time you were here, is a smaller version of Bob's room, yet it's as big, if not bigger, than most of our competitors' rooms. And we used it at the time as an edit room. And this is going back, you know, before I started here in '98, that's how it was used, all the way up until August of 2001 when we converted it as my mastering room. And here, I'm on a cable here with the Ethernet for good connection, but I can give you an idea of what the room looks like. I hope. A little lower. Little lower. How are we doing there? It's kind of hard to
there you go. There you go. Now we've got a bit of a look.
There we go. Okay, good. Sorry about that. You know, so all the same gear that we have in Bob's room, that's always been the case. I have done Tact Sovereigns, which you know well, an Australian product.
Yes, indeed.
DMC console, ton of outboard. Basically, it's a room that is built exactly the same as Bob's room, but it's just in a smaller space. Yet again, still a really large space for a mastering control room. When you were here, it was an edit room. And when I started taking on a lot of work, starting in 2000, I was working in Bob's room around his schedule. And he's always busy. I was starting to get really busy. We were going to expand and build another room. And I said to Bob, you know, that's a lot of construction, a lot of all the stuff that goes into that. It's a huge expenditure. It's a, you know, we hope the room works out well kind of thing. And I said, that room that we use as an edit room, we were using it less so as an edit room then, because this was about the time that everybody was getting Pro Tools and the mix and the recording studios. And I said, that room sounds amazing. It sounds just like your room. Let me try doing some stuff up there and let's see how that works out. And I tried something, checked it out in his room, and it was spot on. And I said, we can make that room work as a mastering room. So we just bought all the same gear, rearranged the workspaces a little bit, and in August of 2001 made it my mastering room, and it's been working fantastic ever since. So we haven't grown in the sense that we haven't put a bigger footprint on what we're doing here, but we've rearranged our rooms in some ways as the business has changed a bit. You know, we had a cutting lathe in a room many years ago before vinyl caught back on. We ended up selling it and making that room into our server room. And we just repurposed the spaces a little bit to accommodate how business has changed or grown, but we've stayed in the same footprint.
And what about the wall space for all the gold and platinum? Because last time I was there was so much gold and platinum on the walls. I thought, gee, you know, this could be, Maine could be known not just for lobsters, but for the most gold and platinum precious metal around the place. So, because I can imagine, seriously, dude.
Yeah, no, there's even more of that now than the last time you were here. Unfortunately, you know, we're living in this business climate where record labels don't send them that often anymore. If we got a gold or platinum record for every record of mine that's gone gold or platinum, or every record of Bob's that's gone gold or platinum, we would have to. I don't mean to be immodest, but we would have to grow newer space.
A warehouse.
And what's cool about that for us, and what's cool about that for Portland, is we ask that, you know, we can't really control how our clients credit us, or even if they do credit us, but we do ask that if they do, that they credit us as, you know, Adam Ayan at Gateway Mastering, Portland, Maine. So there are, you know, millions and millions and millions of records out there with Portland's name on them as well.
Yeah, I think it's great.
We definitely take pride in where we live.
No, so tell me, how is Bob these days? Let me ask you quickly. How is he?
He's doing great.
That's awesome. So I saw a photo of him at recent AES, and he that guy always had a smile on his face. I'm sure he has his bad days as well, but I've never known him and never not seen him not to be a jovial kind of guy.
Yeah, no, he's really happy. He's doing really well. He's, of course, like myself, we appreciate what we do. We know we're privileged to work with the artists we work with, and it makes us happy people, that's for sure. So yeah, he was just out at AES, as was I, and he gave some panels, gave some lectures, and he loves what he does and keeps plowing through.
Absolutely. So listen, I was noticing also online that you're a keen runner and you've run some half marathons, you've done some long distance running anyway in recent times.
Yeah, that's right.
So what got you into running? And tell me, what sort of difference has it made, as a runner in life? How's it, what effect has it had on you, and what keeps you doing it?
That's a great question. So I started running probably in my early to middle 20s. I was never an athlete as a kid. I was a music kid, a rock kid. And so I started running as well as working out in general, just for a means of staying fit. We live a sedentary lifestyle here in the studio. And about the time I was 29, I decided I wanted to challenge myself and run a full marathon, and started putting on distance. And I started to realize pretty quickly that I enjoyed distance running, that, what some folks say they get out of meditation, I get out of running long distances. It's a stress relief. It's obviously good for physical fitness, great for mental fitness, getting out and enjoying fresh air, sunshine, all of the things that we know are good about getting outside and just moving our bodies in one way or another. I really discovered I enjoyed mostly doing that or my means of doing that is distance running. So I've run some marathons. These days I mostly run half marathons and 10Ks, the occasional 5K. I try to get out on a daily basis, at least 5 to 6 days a week, run about 30 to 40 miles a week. And what I've gotten out of that, aside from the physical fitness aspect of it, is, again, that sort of feeling of what people get out of meditation. I get out there and I pound the pavement, and any stresses I might have go away. We live in this beautiful place of Portland, Maine, where I can walk out my door and within less than a half a mile, I can be running along the ocean. And we have beautiful fresh air here, beautiful scenery and beautiful fresh air. And it just, I think it makes for a better quality of life overall. So that I always do that in the morning, so that by the time I get into session, it's already done, it's achieved. And I think I get the benefits of that throughout my entire day, every day. And also I think that in terms of feeling like I've achieved something, having not been an athlete as a kid, setting goals outside of what I do professionally feels good as well. I was joking with a friend of mine who's also a runner recently, also in audio. And I said the first time in the past couple of years, I put on a lot of speed. And the first time I ever placed in my age group in a race, I couldn't believe it. And I said to my wife, be there with me, I said, this is better than winning a Grammy. And I genuinely meant that, because it was something that did not come naturally to me, and was a lot of hard work over many years of pounding the pavement to get to a place where I could put on speed that I couldn't put on in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. I'm putting on speeds that I couldn't put on in my 20s or my 30s, and that I never wanted to achieve nor thought I would. So it's a good self-esteem boost too. But mostly it's the physical and the mental aspects that you get out of getting out and moving your body, getting fresh air, and doing that, especially for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Look, I completely agree. I would say that for me, having gone to the gym and doing something physical outside of the sedentary works, place and work life that is the studio, it's really important. And I see a lot of musicians who probably not as healthy and as fit, and I encourage them that they should do something, because as you said, I think that when you have a physical fitness, you have mental clarity, and it just helps you work better. It helps you helps you with stress management, and I think that it's balance. I think we need to do things, get outside, get in the fresh air. You said before you're running along the coast, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall correctly, that Maine has the longest coastline of all the states in America?
That's correct. Yeah, I think it's somewhere like north of 3,000 miles of coastline, when they factor in the fact that it's a jagged, rocky twisty turny coast and all of the islands as well ends up being more than 3,000 miles of coastline along the east coast of the state of Maine.
It's amazing when you look at the state on the map, right? As you said, because of the jaggedness of the islands. But yeah, so I'm glad I recall.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of like fingers and peninsulas and things that when you add that all up, it's not a straight line. It adds up to be so much coastline along the state. It's amazing.
So what are you doing from here on? Like in terms of work, you're doing a lot of more remastering work you're finding these days, or is it just the usual run of the mill kind of current stuff? Because I've noticed you've done a lot of remastering, a lot of box sets of late, my friend.
Yeah, so the remastering stuff has dropped off a little bit. It's not quite as much as it used to be. I've got to imagine that now in 2018, so many catalogs have been mastered, remastered, and remastered again, and like that. I did recently master Queen's soundtrack for the Bohemian Rhapsody movie that's coming out soon, and that included a bunch of their recordings that hadn't been released yet, or hadn't been released at least as audio-only formats. The remastering that was dropped off, so I'd say a vast majority of what I'm doing is sort of first run new albums of all genres. A lot of pop, a lot of rock, a ton of stuff from Nashville. Like oftentimes I'll have anywhere from 3 to 5 of any of the top 10s in the Billboard country charts because I get so much work from Nashville, which is wonderful. A lot of Latin as well from all over the world, all over Latin America. A lot of international work in general, which is a great coupling with everything I'm doing domestically. Not to mention a lot of live work too. Often, the sort of souvenir 2 CD or DVD Blu-ray type sets of big artists, international world tours, excuse me. So more of the frontline first release than remastering these days. Unfortunately, my tape machine has not gotten a good workout in a little bit because of that.
So do you actually get the luxury of the tapes? Because I've done a little bit of remastering work, and often I don't get the luxury of having the original unmastered tape, unfortunately. So it doesn't, it's not a true remaster, which puts you sort of on the back foot a little. Although you can, produce a result that, where people can hear a difference. So you do get the luxury of that more often than not, of the old original tapes and whatnot.
Absolutely. If we're doing a remastering, I often will get the tapes to work from. Now, most of the record labels, at least here in the States, have digitized all of their assets over the years and are reluctant to send out tapes, but we'll often push to get the actual analog tapes because one of the benefits that we offer in terms of working with the tape is our signal path is by far the best I've heard, and also has a lot of variables. Like for instance, I have an ATR tape machine sitting 10 feet from me right now that has 3 different playback electronics. So right off the bat, if I get the analog tape, I can start informing the overall sound just based on my playback electronics. So we often fight to get the tapes when we can, even though the labels now want to try to just send us their high-res masters. High-res transfers of those tapes, which can work. But often what we find is that, if we get the artist or the original producers involved, which they often, of course, are, usually almost always are, if we get them on our side, they'll usually, do any of the last push that's needed to get the tapes in our hands, which I think is really important in terms of start straight from the tape, right through our signal path from the get-go to yield the best result.
It's one of those things sometimes that you have to deal with this diplomacy, isn't it? When you're dealing with artists or labels and, people can have, the customer's always right. And, as the saying goes, but when you do really believe that you have a strong case and they want it a certain way, a lot of psychology 101 and diplomacy comes into play, doesn't it? In this gig.
Oh, absolutely. I think diplomacy is one of the most important things to keep in mind. And I think the ability to work with others, be diplomatic and realize your role as a mastering engineer, my role as a mastering engineer is key to what I do. I'm here to service the artist and their vision, oftentimes through the record producer, because that's who I might deal with the most, but I never lose sight of that's really important. And, sometimes there can be vying interests in any given project. And I stay diplomatic and try to work in the project to its fullest potential that way. And that's so important. That's something we can never lose sight of. I mentioned that at AES this past week, having a discussion, and I was with a group of mastering engineers giving a presentation, and we were of course talking about that dead horse we keep beating of loudness. And somebody said something about educating clients, and they were coming from a very positive and very good place with that. But I just said, I don't like to use the word educate because it might put an artist or a client on their heels a little bit. I prefer to use the word consult, because that's what I'm here to do, is consult. And education might be a component of that, but I never want to tell an artist how they should make their art. I want to help them get it there, and I want to inform them of my opinion of how to get it there best. But I'm consulting with them, and that's a big part of what we're doing, and we should never lose sight of that in this business. I completely agree.
No, absolutely. I remember Bob himself told me that to be successful at this, he told me you need to have personal empathy and musical empathy, and when you can have those two qualities, he said, then you'll do okay. Because at the time, I remember telling him, as I told some other engineers and I'm very grateful that they were so. They were very reassuring to me, because unlike you and lots of other my contemporaries who are technically very au fait and really kind of know all the ins and outs of the science, if you will, of mastering, I come from the other end of the spectrum, where I have let's just say, a humble grasp of the basics. But when it comes down to music theory and all the very, someone like a Bob Katz, for example, who really sort of gets right into the minutia, that stuff I find very intimidating. But I learned that while all that's really great and important, if you're good with the clients and you knew how to make a record sound, it was like, well, I don't quite understand what this button does, but when I turn it here, it goes warm. It goes great. The record jumps out of the speakers. So it's one thing because I get a lot of kids just tell me the same thing. They go, I'm not very technical. I don't understand all this kind of mumbo jumbo, but I still want to do it. And I thank Bob for that, because he reassured me that, look, if you get along well with people, and you understand the music and you can hear the vision and you know how to get there, all that other stuff is it's important. It's important to know, and it's good to have, but it can be superfluous too, and sometimes it can get in the way of making a record, because music's about feeling emotion and whatnot.
Exactly. I completely agree. And honestly, before I went to the University of Massachusetts for sound recording, I wasn't a very technical person. I was a musician, and I didn't have a great grasp of the technical end of things. And fortunately, I found that I had the aptitude for it. I've always considered that a means to an end, and the end being making great music, right? So having musical empathy I think needs to be the most important skill set of any good engineer, and having of course, the technical means of getting yourself there is important, but I think is something that can be learned more so than the musical empathy part, which is something that might be already inside of you in one way or another. So I agree, the technical is a means to the end of getting us to the point of making great records, but I try not to focus too much on the technical side. Even when I talk to my clients, I prefer to talk in musical terms. If they start talking technically, or if I start talking technically, I'll take a step back and say, let's talk musically. Like, you want me to try something a little different? What is it that you're looking for? And they might say, I want the snare to crack. Okay, well, I didn't need you to tell me you needed, a boosted 4K. Maybe I might boost it 4K, or maybe I might do some other things to make the snare to crack. But if we're talking in musical terms, I can generally get there really easily. And I think that's really important. One thing I learned from Bob early on, to your point, is open-mindedness as well. I recall when I was assisting him, one of the first times somebody asked for some revisions that I was helping him with, I remember thinking that I didn't agree with what the client was asking for. I wasn't sure that Bob did, but Bob had this modesty about him that was, no, let's be open-minded, let's try this, because he found over the years that he always learned something. And sure enough, we could see the point of view the client had, and we got the client there making those revisions. And that was really powerful, being a young person in this industry, especially an industry of big personalities, to have the open-mindedness and the humility to listen to what a client's saying and be open-minded about it, and follow them on that journey. And that was something I learned very early on from him, that I must say, I'm not sure if every engineer takes that tact. And I think that that's a little, I don't want to say secret sauce, but it's a little nugget of knowledge that's really important, is that humility and open-mindedness to realize what we're doing is subjective and creative, and let the client, tell you what they're looking for, and follow that muse, and you'll always learn something that way, I think.
Most
And
definitely.
you make the client happy.
Oh, most definitely. Happy clients are good clients, because I guess like you guys, word of mouth is probably the best marketing tool you could have, but that's something that takes quite a long period of time. And you can market and advertise all you want, but there's nothing quite like having someone come to you that has never worked with you before, but is there as a result of maybe a record they heard, but someone that they work with, that they know and trust, because then it doesn't become a sell. And this is one of these things I tell young guys starting out, because the way you're going to get your foot in the door now, I tell people the best way to get your foot in the door is to build your own door to put your own foot through, because the old model is pretty much dead and buried. And it takes a while to build a clientele, especially in this day and age. And while the internet is great and social media is great, and you can have some great photographs and look the part, it takes some time to get some records out, and get some records that get known and played and blogged and what have you, to build that association to you, and then to build that trust with people, so they want to come and work alongside you.
That's right, exactly. That's this whole business is word of mouth. I found social media to be a helpful tool in a world where we don't see liner notes very much anymore. But I don't think social media would be as powerful of a tool as I feel it is for myself if I didn't already have the credentials that I have, which have come solely by word of mouth, which is so important in this business.
So when you got your first few clients, was it a case of like, for example, I got a young guy here called Tom Beard, my young protege, and I've been getting people on board with him, and just saying, hey, listen, would you like to give this guy a go, and personally vouch for him, and guarantee that if they're not happy, I'll sort it out. So when you first started out, was it Bob kind of tooting your horn, so to speak, and offering us some kind of assurance about you, or insurance, or just to sort of give them some backing, or was it a case of you going out and doing the hustle and trying to bring people in yourself?
It was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of, people, what would happen is somebody might call for Bob and might not be able to get in the time frame they wanted, and the front office would pitch them on me, not a hard sell or anything, but just like, we have another engineer here as well. And I would always offer, to do a cut at no charge to get on the same page with me early on. And then of course there were some clients that had known Bob really well and might talk to Bob about, tell me a little bit more about Adam and what he does ahead of time. But mostly it was the front office pitching some of that work that otherwise wouldn't fit in the schedule. And you know what? Sometimes a client would say, yeah, I'll give Adam a shot. And sometimes they'd say, oh no, if I can't get in with Bob, I'm going to go use so-and-so or so-and-so or so-and-so. That coupled with my own hustle, whether it be like at AES, trying to meet potential clients, even here locally in the Northeast, Boston, and here in Portland. And then just years of doing that grind and having both of those things work to a point where over several years or a handful of years, clients were coming on that word of mouth thing, whether it was, one producer talking to another saying that they liked my work, or somebody looking at the liner notes of an album that I worked on, all those other things that you were just talking about in terms of word of mouth and how we get work in this business. But yeah, at the very beginning, it was a combination of Bob and Gateway as an entity vouching for me, and myself just doing whatever hustle I could to get work in the door.
Yeah, again, branding and reputation, such a big thing, because I'm sure that if it was you and some other person who was relatively new in the scene working at a lesser known studio, I'm sure that sometimes just the association of being, with a certain studio or working with a certain engineer would sometimes could be, give you the edge to at least have the opportunity, to to cut the record.
Yeah.
After that, of course, it's going to come down to the end result. But still, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's getting someone to at least say, you know what, we'll give you a shot, and it's just wonderful for you, man. I mean, and you earned your way into that place anyhow. So I think again, to have that name behind you, but also I think that with an assumption that you would have to have been pretty bloody good to be there in the first place, but again.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's sort of the stamp of approval, isn't it? I got in the door in the first place of a facility that was so well known, and that was what I wanted, and I was very fortunate that it worked out. And then I had the opportunity to work with Bob, and he got his stamp of approval. And I think that's the best way to start. It's hard to do that now, as you said, because there are fewer facilities and fewer opportunities like that. I kind of got in just at the tail end of those kinds of opportunities, but that's nothing to make light of in terms of the fact that there's the seal of approval of like, oh yeah, not only was I hired here at first to be a production engineer and then Bob's assistant, but then I proved the aptitude of being able to master records at a quality that was consistent with what Bob is doing here and what the Gateway name is and reputation means, that I've always taken very seriously. Bob and Gail have known that about me, and I've told them that so many times over the years that, I came to Gateway because I wanted to be associated with the reputation that Gateway already had, which was making some of the finest sounding records in the world. And I take that opportunity and that privilege really, very, very seriously. And so all these years, I've always worked really hard to keep my craft, honed and stay on top of my game and develop all the clientele that I can. But it certainly does start with being in a place that is that stamp of approval, which is, as a young person, why I wanted to come here in the first place.
And the other thing, you make a good point. It's so important also to maintain that level of feeling, grateful for where you are. Sometimes I get young kids who are a bit disgruntled, and they'd say, "Well, it's easy for you because you're already established," and there's this assumption that the work just flies in the door simply because of who you are and where you're from, and that helps to a point, but as cliche as it sounds, you're only as good as the last record you've ever done. And, and human nature is set up that when you could do 100 records, 99 great, and the last one isn't so great, usually you're remembered for the one that isn't so great, or usually, the bad news will travel further, and people are more inclined to talk about the negatives more than the positives. So you really, getting in is one thing, staying there is another, and staying on top of your game. And for me, Adam, it's always, I sit in this room and I pinch myself still and I go, shit, I still feel this sense of, gratitude and just feeling so wonderful about, wow, because I do remember the time when I had no money, no studio, no anything. And so we need to maintain that ourselves at a high standard, with the work we do, with the way we do with people, and just never take anyone or anything for granted, no matter what. And that is something that should stay with us, I think, until the day we decide to stop.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's how I conduct myself as well. And I think folks, when they come here, for sessions with me, or we meet otherwise, and if I give somebody a tour here, it's the enthusiasm. And what I always say is, I've been here for over 20 years now, but I still, it's not lost on me how special this particular place is, but also how special it is that I get to do what I get to do. And so I remain positive and enthusiastic. And I think that that's important. I'm glad that, I don't know, I guess maybe that's my disposition and the gratitude that's there for being in this position. I haven't lost sight of it, and I hope I never do, because it's really important. And I think that shows in our work too. If you're, a person like yourself or myself that has that sense of gratitude and appreciation and knows that what we do is special and what we love, that what we do, I think that we take it so seriously and bring a level of enthusiasm that shows. And I think that shows to clients, and clients love, clients want you to be enthusiastic about your work and their work. And we shouldn't be doing this if we're not, in my opinion. And I think that really shows when we come to it from that, like a positive place and a positive attitude.
Most definitely. And the other thing I really liked about Gateway, as I remember, when I set up this place, was the the culture that was created within the place. And Bob and Gail treated everyone there like family. People were there, weren't just employees. And I always thought that that's the sort of place you want to be working at. And at the time, I didn't have any other people here, but as I started getting, now I've got a small crew. I've got 3 guys who work out of here now, and it's the same kind of deal. I mean, for me, they're not just guys who come in and cut records and leave money in the place. They are, because without them, it wouldn't be the same. And so I thought, you know what, I want to create a place where if I was not the owner, I'd want to be coming to, and I'd want to stay. Even if I could set up my own place, I wouldn't want to leave, Right. And that's what I picked up at Gateway, and I sensed that, and I thought, wow, what a great thing to take away, other than just, in terms of, buying this gear or having this room or these monitors or these converters, all that's important, but that the culture and the environment that you create for the people that work there, and as well for the staff, the clients that came in, it's the way you treat and look after your clients, the thing that wants to keep them coming back.
Absolutely. It's so important. So important. I mean, we all, we want to work in good working environments, and like you said, creating them for the staff, but also creating that kind of environment for the artist as well that's welcoming is really, really important. And kudos to you for doing that as well, because I think it is a big difference. And your people will remember that and will stick around because of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my friend, listen, I'm aware of the time that we've used up, and I know that I'm going to have to let you go. But Adam, I just want to say how grateful I am that you took the time out to speak with us and share us your insights and views, my friend. And congratulations on a stellar career. You are an ornament to the industry. You carry yourself so well. You're a true gentleman. And thank you so much for spending some time with us and having a chat. It's been awesome, my friend, and hopefully we'll have another one next year.
Thank you, Tony. It's been my pleasure, man. Thank you for inviting me to do this. And like I said, it's great to talk with you. Great to see you, even on a computer screen. And I hope to do it again with you soon, man.
Absolutely. And our regards to Bob and Gail and everyone else down at Gateway from us here. And take care of yourself, my friend. And we'll catch you soon.
Thank you, Tony. I'll talk to you soon, man.
You got it, man. So there you go, Mr. Adam Ayan from Gateway Mastering. Thank you very much to all of you who have watched and listened in. I really enjoyed this episode. It was wonderful. All right, I'm out of here. As always, say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers, and catch you later. All right, see ya. Bye.